All right, hello everybody. I know a few of you are still getting pizza, but in the interest of time, we want to get this party started. So, hi, I'm Tyler Moore. I'm a Tanny Assistant Professor of Cybersecurity here in the Computer Science Department, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of the Sarah and John Graves Cybersecurity Distinguished Lecture Series. So this lecture series has been made possible by the generous support of John Graves, who's in the audience right now. I'd like to recognize him for his contribution. Now that we're getting started. Okay, we're back. Okay, so just very quickly, since we're short on time, we have our inaugural lecture today. We have another slate of talks lined up. In a couple of weeks, we have Damon McCoy talking about the underground economy. We have two talks lined up for you in the spring, Bruce Schneier in February, and Professor Ross Anderson from Cambridge University in April. So we have a good slate. If you want to learn more about it, sign up for one of the email sheets that's going around. Just super briefly, we're starting some new curriculum programs here at the university. We have a new master's in cybersecurity and a minor in cybersecurity. If you want to learn more about that, come talk to me. And without further ado, I want to turn the floor over to our speaker. So Professor John Savage, it comes from Brown University. His PhD from MIT, worked with Bell Labs, made seminal contributions in complexity theory related to circuit design. Had a very varied, interesting career. Beginning around 6 or so years ago, he got interested in cybersecurity policy. He was selected as a Jefferson Science Fellow, which is a prestigious program for faculty to interact with the U.S. State Department. And since then, he's had made a lot of contributions in understanding cybersecurity policy and helping out policymakers understand the technical issues that remain. And so, without further ado, John, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I'm going to outline the challenge for you today. You know, we're dealing with cyberspace. I think most of you know what that is. We know it empowers us, but we are aware, I think most of you are aware of the risks that are associated with it as well. The risks include the possibility, which is unlikely, but the possibility of cyber conflict. And what it does do is present serious challenges of a political and a technical nature. And this is a field in which we need political scientists, social scientists, computer scientists, psychologists, lawyers. We need a whole panoply of people to address the problems. Cyber computing, commercial computing is not very old, 65 years old. There are some of us in the room who are older than 65. The worm, which is a piece of code that will propagate by itself from machine to machine, was invented at the Palo Alto Research Center in '79. Robert Morris, conducting an experiment to determine how big the internet was, used a vulnerability that existed in the Unix operating system back in 1998 and released a worm, and unfortunately it wasn't designed properly, so it caused a lot of computers to get completely overloaded, drew the attention of the government, and the government said he violated federal law, which I'll discuss later, and they fined him something like $10,000. He's now on the faculty at MIT. So in 1989, Clifford Stahl, whose daughter is now an advisee of mine, wrote a book detailing his experience in tracking a spy through government computer systems. This happened because he was told there is an accounting error. We can't account for a small amount of money that hasn't been paid for by existing accounts used to pay for computing in those days. And he wrote a fascinating book, which is historic now. We've seen cybercrime flourish. The Stuxnet worm, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, emerged in 2010, attacked the Iranian nuclear refinement facility, and created quite a stir. It was the first really genuine cyber weapon. What's the internet? You may not know it as a collection of networks. It was intended to take different networks and interconnect them using a protocol called TCP/IP or IP protocol. Each of these networks is run by what's called an autonomous system. So your institution here probably is an autonomous system. It allocates domain names to the computers that you use in this university. Packets in the internet move, data moves in packets. Chunks of maybe 1,024 bytes that travel through the internet together with a header specifying where it's coming from and going. The path that packets take through the network will vary from packet to packet. It may vary from packet to packet depending upon the conditions on the internet at that time, even though they may be going between the same source and destination. We have a directory system for the internet called the domain name system. When we don't know the mapping from a domain name to a string of 30, represents a string of 32 bits. The period separates decimal numbers, but in this spot we put a decimal number ranging from 0 to 255, and there are 256 8-bit patterns, and each one of these numbers corresponds to one of those, so you have 4 8-bit patterns, 32 bits. You need these bit strings in the header of a packet to get the packet from its destination and to send a response back to the source if you need to do that. This system is based on trust, and that trust can be violated, and it's an opportunity for what's called domain name system hijacking. I'll explain that more later. We also have an important border gateway protocol. Now, this is a little technical, so bear with me. We'll get to the fun stuff in a minute. Unless you like this, in case this is the fun stuff. Each autonomous system has can put out announcements saying, if you give me your packet stream, I will get it to this destination, and it will go through a series of other autonomous systems before it gets there. This is what it would look like here. It says, if you give me an address in this range, I will send it. I have number autonomous system 42. I'll send it to 3, and then they'll go to 701, and finally to 49, get to its destination. These announcements are important because you have on the internet routers. These are nodes. A packet arrives at the router. The router is owned by an autonomous system, and it's going to leave and go to a router belonging to another autonomous system. Which one does it go to? Well, if you have these announcements and knowing what paths are available, the router can then be set up, and we'll do this automatically, so we'll find a quick path from the current place to the destination. And this, it sounds maybe a little obscure, but it's to illustrate the point. This is a human-made system with, and we had to invent a lot of techniques for dealing with it. The current high-level threats we deal with today, in my view, these are things that I'm highlighting, they're not the only ones, is legacy software, old software, written a long time ago, still in heavy use. The person who wrote it is long gone, but it can be buggy because it wasn't written with security in mind. We have a lot of new technologies. When the cloud first appeared, I was in the State Department, and the guy from in charge of network security said to me, and for the entire State Department, said, "Do you trust the cloud? We have this new CIO for the government. He's saying we all have to move to the cloud. What do you think of that? Isn't that dangerous?" Okay. You have people wanting to bring their smartphones into the office, and they want to connect to the office network, and they're likely to carry out corporate data or government data in the process. And then we have all these new appliances, Nest thermometers and other things that all will connect to the internet, but they're using old software. It's maybe buggy, have bugs in it, or bugs are found later, and nobody has the money to fix them because they're going to sell them and then disavow them after they're gone. Unless we have laws that say they have to take responsibility. Social media is wonderful, but if you misuse it, you reveal secrets, and somebody can use that to break into your company, the company for which you work. Your privacy can be in danger. We've seen maybe what look like excesses in government surveillance on the part of the National Security Agency. This is another issue that needs to be addressed. Our fundamental problem here, though, is we don't understand security very well. We don't know how to make systems completely secure. We're learning a lot. We're identifying patterns that we can address. But, and And our most serious problem is against persistent attackers. These are individuals or organizations who want to break into your computer, and they're going to do everything they can. Okay, you can see some other things. I'm going to list 4 high-level types of attack, just to give you a taste. The first is flooding attacks. You participate in the anonymous group, and you want to punish someone. So what do? You get all your buddies to use what's called the low ion
Orbital candle.
Orbital candle. Strange name for something, but you boot this up and you access your botnet. You rent a botnet from somebody, and you cause all those machines to send a stream of data to one site, overwhelming the site. You can do the same thing. This is most of you probably know about denial of service. But there's something called root flapping that's not discussed very much in the news, but it was the subject of a research project a few years ago where these guys drove high volume of data between 2 routers at the top tier of the internet, and if you drive the data through, it will not allow for control information to be sent. And if these 2 routers don't communicate with each other often enough, they assume the link is broken. So they send out these BGP, Border Gateway Protocol announcements, telling the world the link is broken. And then if you release the pressure, the data, they make contact and they send out new announcements saying, oh, all these links are now on. And there was an experiment that was done, it was a simulation, where 1 minute of this kind of activity required 10 minutes for the internet routing to settle down. So I'm telling you this story so that you know that it's not just individual machines can be compromised. You can actually disrupt routing on the internet big time. Penetration attacks. Somebody breaks into your computer and they own it. Exploitation attacks. They do this, then they extract information. In the early days, meaning until fairly recently, extraction data was the objective. But now we also are seeing disruptive attacks where people are going to destroy or manipulate data. So for example, these recent leaks that the email sent by John Podesta, who was the campaign chairman of Secretary Clinton, apparently may have been distorted by whoever released them. So this is a new kind of attack that's designed to encourage distrust, okay? And this kind of thing can be very difficult to discern, call out, and you never know what's going to happen. A typical penetration attack, if you haven't experienced one yourself, is you click on a link from which you think is a trusted source, visit a website, you download a malicious payload, and that exploits a hole, a bug in the code, it loads malware. Once the malware is on the machine, it's a small piece of code. What it does is it calls down a big piece of code, which is like a mini operating system feeling. It's called Remote Access Trojan, or RAT, okay? So if you got rats in your computers, you're in trouble. And then the attacker remotely controls the computer. I want to describe what I'm calling a persistent threat campaign, using the word campaign to say that this is a serious effort. It's meant to run over a long period of time. And you can imagine this applying to a military situation. You find a point of entry, you look around the moat, around the castle. Is there a moat full of water? If there is, are there bridges? Can you put a bridge across? Where are the weak points in the castle wall? You install a rat. You try to find a machine where the person who is operating that machine has highest level privileges. You try to elevate your privilege. You steal them from that person. Then you have to conduct reconnaissance. You want to know where the good stuff is. What is the good stuff? This is not a simple task. If I asked each of you, how neatly is your file system organized? Could I get onto your computer and find stuff quickly? And the answer is no. Most of us. Okay, so I'm telling you this story to emphasize the point that reconnaissance is difficult. It takes a long time. TJ Maxx was penetrated a few years ago, and the people who broke in spent over a year before they were discovered. They put 2 different sets of tools in there. They thought they were going to steal the data from the disks. They found that when the data was put on the disk, it was encrypted. So they had to steal it from the active memory. They had to do memory scraping, it was called. Okay? This is a big deal. They had to worry about, when they had to collect the data, put it someplace, they had to worry that the place where they put it, the files was so big that they would be discovered. They had to worry about whether they were increasing the workload of the computer, because if they had run their software at maximum speed, they would have reduced the computation rate on the TJX computers by a factor of 2. That would have become visible. And then you have to decide if you're going to exfiltrate, are you going to compress it? Are you going to encrypt it? And when you exfiltrate it, where do you send it? Okay? And if you send it to the wrong place, you'll be discovered. Then you have to maintain your covert stats. And this is by the techniques that I mentioned. You may have to update your tools and redo the reconnaissance. Currently, ransomware is in the news, and it's a high percentage of the spam has ransomware. Denial of service attacks, which have been around a long time, suddenly have become extraordinarily high volume attacks. 0.7 trillion bits per second. There's a Brian Krebs, who used to write for the Washington Post, got his own website. He was hit with an attack of this magnitude. He was using Akamai as his content distribution network. They said, sorry, Brian, we can't host you anymore because you're overwhelming our system. Business email compromise, where you trick an employee into believing that the email has come from the CEO or the president of the company and you must wire so much money now. Bring your own device is a problem that I mentioned before. At the national level, critical infrastructures are threatened. These are systems that control power, electricity, oil and pipe gas lines. And national economic resources are at risk. For example, there is this clearing system called CHIPS. They are a big clearance system in the United States. They handle over $1.5 trillion per day. Now, can you calibrate what 1.5 trillion means? Well, the GDP, the gross output of the United States, is 18 trillion per year now. So if you think of this amount being handled per day, if you could disrupt this system, and you could take all the data and just throw it away, that would torpedo our economy. And our national elections, as we've heard from the U.S. government, being threatened this year. The Russians are, we're told, with high confidence, are hacking the Democratic National Committee. They've penetrated state voter registration databases, and it's not clear how far they'll go, but it seems to be happening. SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, is the name used for a lot of the technologies, control systems that are used in many industries. You're going to refine petroleum, you have a control system. This is an example here, I think. You're going to use a control system. These systems, such as is used in Stuxnet, were never meant to be secure. Nobody thought about security when they were being built. Why? Because the people doing it were not computer scientists. Even if they were, they probably wouldn't have thought about security. One story I want to tell about this is there is a company based in Canada called Telvet, which in 2012 was found to have malware installed on their system, and Telvet manages something like 60% of the oil and gas pipelines in North America. Okay, so the scenario that occurred to me at the time was, hey, if they can allow the pumps in these lines to be overpressured, they can create an explosion of the kind that occurred in Russia a few years back, presumably due to CIA involvement. The SCADA systems are often fragile. Of course, they're designed to adapt to change because they're control systems, but cascading failures are possible. Here's a picture. This is President Ahmadinejad of Iran. He's no longer president. And this is a centrifuge that they have in this installation. They had 1,000 plus, I think they now have 3,000 centrifuges that refines uranium gas to make, to isolate the uranium type, to
238.
238. What is it? What kind of, what's the word it's associated What is it? Isotope, radioisotope. So Stuxnet was really a paradigm shift, a model shift in malware. It is a very sophisticated and complex word. The worm hid itself. It waited after it got on board something like 27 days before it would activate. It would only pick one centrifuge at a time, and it would spin it up, and it would drop it down in speed. And while it was doing this, the system played a video of the system in operation when nobody was touching it. So it looked like normal operation to the operator, but this was happening in the background. So the goal was to give the impression that the material used in the centrifuge was of inferior quality. It was discovered around 2010. It had been in operation previously to that. Because it was so carefully designed, when it infected and got out of the Natan system and infected other machines, it didn't do any damage at all because it was really targeted at that particular system. In order to do that, they had to do very high-level intelligence to figure out how this system was put together. The computers in question were not on the internet; they were isolated. They had air-gapped. The New York Times attributes this Stuxnet worm to the U.S. and Israel, and it was really a new era here in cyber conflict. At the international level, something you may not think about is international communications. 99% of all of the international internet traffic is carried on undersea cables. And the undersea cables that supply the United States that take data to and from Europe, where do you think they come in? Where do they land? In New Jersey. And why do they land in New Jersey? Where's AT&T? They used to run out of New Jersey, and they laid most of those cables. So if you want to disrupt communications to Europe, all you need to do is use a few sticks of dynamite in a few buildings in New Jersey. Okay? But there are a lot of choke points. The Luzon Straits in the Pacific, another choke point, because a lot of cables go through there, and that's an earthquake zone. Okay, so there are a number of places we're much more exposed to disruption than you would think. I mentioned the destabilization of internet routing. You can play around with the domain name system. Cyber conflict is a possibility. My greatest concern if that happens is our national economies will be destroyed. We can turn out the lights. Federal Electric Reliability Corporation is a U.S. government agency designed to ensure the reliable operation of our electrical grid. Did a study a couple of years ago in which they pointed out that there are 9 substations, places where high voltage power is stepped down to house level, which if they were taken out of service, you could turn out the lights and walk around. Okay? So, and there was somebody conducted 2 experiments in 2 successive years, a year apart, in Palo Alto, where they used rifles to shoot holes into the transformers that were doing the stepping down from high to low voltage. Their oil leaked out. They had people off-site who saw that and redirected the power. So they beefed up this place. They put in guards, put in razor wire, lights, and so forth. The following year, a team of some size came in, cut through the chain link fence, got on the grounds, and nobody did anything. So are we really paying attention? And then Bruce Schneier, who's going to speak soon, has recently reported that a number of companies are seeing very high, they're seeing DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, where they come in and they elevate the level of the volume of traffic up to a certain point, and they wait to see what kind of response they get from the party that's been attacked. And then they will come back later, start at that high level and work their way up. He said, this is behavior that's not typical of hackers. This is state-type behavior. So what the heck is going on? Okay. Oh, and one other thing. DoD last year and again this year released its Law of War manual, and in there they talk about pre-implantation of cyber weapons. And there is General Kelleher, who used to be head of Strategic Command, who was asked a couple of years ago, do we are you concerned about, will you use cyber weapons in conflict? He said, we're going to use everything that's at our disposal. Okay. So that worries me because I'm concerned that there may be, because something can be done, people may be thinking that we should do it, when in fact the consequences of doing it could be very dangerous. So this is a policy issue. How do you, I'm going to describe 4 ways of addressing security threats. First is to improve technology, and there you need to use best practices for writing hardware and software. There are companies, Microsoft being one of them, who developed a whole methodology for writing software correctly, securely, and checking it before it leaves the okay. There's another group that's Gary McGraw, he leads, called Built-in Security Maturity Model, BSIMM, and he's collecting these best practices together from many corporations. You need to replace, as I said, legacy code. You may need to redesign hardware for those situations that are mission critical. Data should be encrypted in rest and in motion. And I want to emphasize that you can compute on encrypted data. Okay? There are people who are now doing research on encrypted search, where you store in your database data that's encrypted and you search with keys that are encrypted. This is new technology that's emerging. You know, the concept of multi-party computation has been around for a while. You got 2 California, Silicon Valley engineers, plutocrats who are very wealthy, and each thinks they're more wealthy than the other. So they want to know who is more wealthy, but they don't want to give away their wealth. Can you code your information up so that you can exchange it with the other person, and together they can come to the same conclusion: A is richer than B. And this is called the multi-party computation problem. And it's an emerging area of research. And then there's something called fully homomorphic encryption, where you encrypt everything and you compute only on encrypted data of the most general kind. The problem with this last category is that as you move from the first to the last category of type of encrypted computation, this type here is very, very expensive. I want to draw your attention to one other interesting new kind of technology. It's called verifiable computation. Here's the scenario. Your job is too time-consuming to do on your computer. You're going to send it to the cloud. You're going to get back results. Are those results the result of that particular computation, or is that a result that was produced when you ran your job yesterday and the cloud operator wanted to use those cycles for some other job? So they said, just give me the results from yesterday. How can you verify quickly at home that the results you got are those that were produced that day? Well, the way you do it is you instrument the code so that what the code gives you back is what we'll call a certificate. It's some data that you can use together with your program and quickly at home verify. I want to talk about now deterrence. How do you deter the bad guy from attacking you? Well, Dr. Strangelove in the movie at that title said deterrence is the art of producing in the mind of the enemy the fear to attack. I'm going to list here 4 factors that may be used to deter an attack. These are due to Kim Tyndale in this document here. The first is you create an expected high level of punishment if the party attacks you. The second is frustration. If the bad guy attacks you and you don't respond, then the attacker can get frustrated, go someplace else. And this can be obtained by making your systems resilient. The third type is common dependency. You want to attack someone, but you realize that if you do that, either you or your friends may get injured. This actually applied to the United States when President Bush decided to invade Iraq in 2009. He was thinking about the possibility of shutting down Saddam Hussein's banking system when he realized that the banking system was owned by the French and connected to those banks and systems in France, and France might have suffered as a result, so it didn't do it. The fourth case is where if you attack, it's counterproductive, meaning So an example of that is we go to a smaller country that's not as well integrated into the internet, and we say we're going to take down their cyber system. Well, if they retaliate, they have the means to do that, retaliate against us. Since we're much more dependent on that technology, that would hurt us more than it would hurt them. So how do you address this? Well, one of the standard techniques is to develop norms of state behavior. These start with goals that you want to reach. Hopefully they lead to agreements and then to law. So let me give you some examples. In the 19th century, we didn't have the automobile. We had horse-drawn vehicles, and we might have had some automobiles, but the point is, if you look at the video movies of New York City in the early days, traffic, there was no rhyme or reason to the traffic. People zigzag across the streets. And so eventually, when it was realized we had to put some order in here for safety reasons, the traffic light was invented. And early in the 20th century, people saw the need to have stop signs. And Tyler was telling me that here in Oklahoma, was it in Tulsa, the yield sign was invented. Okay? Now these are required by law. So you come through this process of first establishing the goals, getting agreements on how to address those goals, and then finally law. So the question is, what about cyber norms? This is a whole new space. We haven't had to grapple with the problems that arise here, so we're confronting this now. Well, the norms began to emerge in the late 90s. In 98, the Russians went before the UN First Committee that deals with disarmament issues and imposed a study of information technology. The US said, no way, we don't want to talk about it, and was put into limbo for a while. The progress was made in between. By 2009, the Russians asked the UN to ban cyber weapons, and that hasn't happened either. But progress has been made. The UN Secretary General has created several committees, I think it's about 5 now, that are referred to as the Government Group of Experts on Information and Communications Technology for Information Security, and they have produced a set of norms that have been approved by the UN General Assembly, UNGA. And they have served as the basis for bilateral and multilateral agreements. For example, last September, US President, Chinese President meet, they decide that one of the norms that they will both honor is that they won't steal intellectual property for commercial uses. And within the first month or so after that signing of that agreement, there was still a high level of attacks from China. This year, in the last few months, I've read that FireEye, which is a big security firm, had to lay off some of their employees because the number of attacks coming out of China had gone down. So I think there's progress. So norms have the potential to work in cyber as they do in other domains. I'm going to read to you 4 norms that were approved by the GGE. This is not their language, this is my summary. The first is an international law, and the UN Charter applies online as well as offline. Okay? At first, in the early days of computer science, you had these gurus who said to the world, John Barlow, this space is a new space, governments, we don't want you in here, stay out, this is our turf. I'm sorry, but it's not going to work. The second one is no country should condone cyber-enabled theft of intellectual property for commercial use. That's the agreement the U.S. got with China. No country should intentionally damage the critical infrastructure of another. You can see how that's in every country's interest, because if the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians were to say, your critical infrastructure is not is open target for us, then they're going to suffer as well. And countries should help mitigate malicious activity that emanates from their territory. So if when I was in the State Department, I argued for something like this, and it didn't get any traction. But within a few years, General Hayden was arguing for this. He used to be head of NSA and CIA, and it did require some traction. It takes a while for people to understand issues before they can adopt them. I want to also draw your attention to this fact that Microsoft has written a very good document. It's called From Articulation to Implementation, Enabling Progress on Cybersecurity Norms, which they just published in June. It's a very nice document. They lay out, among other things, 6 corporate norms, and I'm going to read from a few of these for you. The first is that companies, the global ICT companies should not permit or enable states to compromise security of their mass market products and services. They're not going to help, they should not help states to compromise their hardware or software. You can see why that would be important if you're a commercial firm, but it's also a way to elevate the overall level of security so that we can freeze out a lot of the script kiddies and those low-level hackers who create so much noise that you can't identify the really bad guys. The second is you should help as a company to prevent, detect, respond, or recover from events in cyberspace. That's like a electronic SOS. And an important fact that I heard about in February when I was at the Munich Security Conference, in December 15, Microsoft decided they're going to notify their customers who have been compromised. They've taken it as their responsibility to tell their customers that they've been compromised. That doesn't mean they'll tell them who is compromising, but it is at least they're going to help them to remedy the situation. They also said you should issue patches to protect, regardless of the attacker and the motives. You should not traffic or proliferate in vulnerabilities for offensive purposes. The U.S. has made progress here. We have signed the Cybercrime Convention of 2001, which says we'll produce laws that are in concert with laws by other countries so that they can share information, catch criminals if they have to, etc. There is a National Institute of Standards and Technologies framework on cybersecurity for critical infrastructures. That's a very good document. A lot of companies are using it as a guideline. It's very generally written to improve their security. Information sharing and analysis between companies and like industries is very effective. Financial services has been doing this for a long time and they're very successful. We got to teach computer security in our schools. You got to do it here. You're doing it here. Okay, take the courses. We're doing it at Brown. Every university should do this. You need to train. We are training for computer emergencies, and we're thinking about data breach notification legislation. I'm going to run through these 4 items, starting 5 items. Hazards and policy formulation. My high level bullet here is better technology policies created with both technologists and policymakers at the table. It's too easy to make mistakes, as was done with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, written at a time when the internet didn't really exist available to the public, only to universities and research labs and the government. And they do flawed analogies. That you had Snowden come along and he told us a lot of things. And the one thing that I take away from this is that NSA, in effect, make policy with their use of technology. There is Lessig, what's his first name? Larry Lessig at Harvard wrote a book called Code is Law. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it is. Where he basically said you can people writing software can set policy without knowing it. Okay? That's a fundamental point that I think wasn't taken into consideration here. And I think they may have made some mistakes, but they seem to have rectified things. The FBI Apple dispute over the iPhone that the FBI couldn't unlock is an interesting case. I'm not going to run through it except to say that this is something that requires us as citizens and as technologists and policymakers to understand the issues. Encryption is a very important technology, but if you encrypt a phone, you don't want to be forced to do something that will unlock all phones, which is what Apple said to FBI when they asked them to unlock the phone. This is an interesting topic, intelligence analysis. Why would you be interested in this? Well, if you want government leaders to be kept informed, but if you work for a corporation, you want to plot corporate strategy, so you need good intelligence to do that. I spoke to government analysts who say that at least 90%, maybe 95% of the information that's used in doing intelligence analysis is public source. It's in newspapers, it's on the web, etc. If you know that, then if you want to do intelligence analysis, corporate or government, you want to read widely, you want to keep abreast of the news. If you have a cyber attack, what do? First, you can ask, is it use of force? Is it that serious? Doesn't have much damage? Can you attribute the source with confidence? If you have both mobile, then you're going to be in conflict, and the law of armed conflict applies, the Geneva Conventions, etc. And there, whatever response you have should be necessary, proportional. In other words, you don't use overkill when you respond. Discriminate between combatants and non-combatants, and be timely. But you need to justify attribution. And so the question you ask is, does that reveal sources and methods? If it does, the government's not going to want to do that. If you have a low-level assault, what's the best thing to do? I think I can summarize by saying it's probably better to steal and reveal. Espionage, state on state, is not illegal. It never will be. Okay? There's no reason to try to legalize it because it would be violent. States requirements come first. But if you reveal attackers, these are two examples that Admiral Stavridis cited in a Foreign Affairs magazine article just the other day. He said you could reveal a nation's censoring tools and methods so that independents can examine that. And so if this were done with the Russians, for example, that might embarrass them. Or expose leader corruption by revealing bank accounts. We need to also rethink how we are currently addressing phishing, ransomware, malware, data loss, exfiltration, our systems, how do we do defense in depth, and what do we do at the enterprise level? Can we use insurance as a mechanism? The answer, I think, is yes, but the way insurance is being used, cyber security insurance is used, it isn't effective. Do we do enough training? Do we hire people who are going to protect our assets? Because inside a threat is an important issue. So let me conclude by saying cyberspace is this, for me at least, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way, this fascinating new medium with many challenges. But we are, good news, we're making progress. When I first got involved 6, 7 years ago, the concern was all about conflict. And conflict is not in the air as much. People are out getting to work, trying to solve problems. But we need a lot of research, policy development, legislation, international negotiation to tame the this Wild West. And that means we need help from all of these categories that I mentioned here. Okay? Everybody can contribute. Accountants can contribute. Okay? Business people can contribute. I don't think it's going to be an easy task, but I think it's going to be fun and interesting. I'll keep you guys, especially